Hello, welcome to the Women Make Manufacturing Move show on IMTS Spark. This series aims to give you insight to enhance your manufacturing career, encourage women in their work, and promote the industry to girls and women of all ages. I'm Kathy Webster, Content Manager for AMT, and I'm here with my colleague, Benjamin Moses, AMT Director of Manufacturing Technology. How are you, Ben?
I'm doing well, Kathy. I'm excited to be here. I'm also excited to speak with today's guest. She is the Security and Compliance Lead at ProShop ERP, a longtime IMTS exhibitor. She is the recipient of the Women in Cybersecurity Society's FAST Award. Her career path may seem unconventional, as she was a liberal arts major and is now leading her company's efforts to be DoD Cybersecurity certified themselves and helping the customers attain certification. She is a lifelong chess enthusiast and can probably checkmate you in less than a minute. Welcome, Julia Boswell.
Hi,
Julia,
thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you for joining us, Julia. I'm so excited that you're here. I first met your company teammates at West Tech 2019, and I was really moved by their passion for what they do because they were machine shop owners, or they worked in machine shops and they just weren't happy with the software and they developed their own. So, I mean, what an amazing company you work for.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how you guys have been faring over the last year with the pandemic and everything?
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing pretty well, because the software that we provide is, a paperless and digital manufacturing environment that's really helped a lot of companies who are trying to facilitate remote work. So in that way, it's been, very good. And then, as an internal company, we are, pretty tech savvy, and we were all used to working at home even before this happened. So it wasn't actually too much of a transition for us to, have to work from home for a while. So it's been good.
All right. And so what about working with your customers? Are you guys able to, meet with them over the internet and help with installations, or how's that part of your business going?
Yeah, most of the training that we provide is done online anyway, in sessions kind of like this over video. There's been a fewer, on-site visits, which normally we would have, but we're hoping that once we can travel again, those will pick back up.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about tell us a lot about your journey into cybersecurity. It seems like you have a really interesting background, and it'd be great to hear how those stepping stones and how it all connected to where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have. I've had an unusual path into both technology and cybersecurity. I did a history and classical languages degree at university. After university, I worked at UBC in the copyright office. And then I eventually decided I needed some change in my life and a bit more excitement, and that's when I moved to working in the private sector at this software company. So I actually had no plans to go into cybersecurity, 4 or 5 years ago. But my boss at this company, ProShop ERP, really recognized kind of an interest and an aptitude for this field, and suggested that I check it out. So I did, and I just kind of immediately fell in love. Even though the subject matter is quite different from what I'm used to, the structures of what I was learning and the way that I learn and the way that my brain kind of operates, it all just kind of clicked in together. And as I said, I fell in love with the field. I was able to connect to a local organization here in Vancouver called the Women's Cybersecurity Society, and they were able to provide resources and guidance and some learning material to really get into it. So it's, I haven't looked back since I started, and it's something that I absolutely love now.
That is so interesting. So how did your liberal arts studies and maybe your work in the copyright office, how did that prepare you for the cybersecurity work?
Yeah, working at UBC was very interesting. It gave me a real sense of, working in large organizations, kind of navigating bureaucracy, as it were. UBC is a fantastic employer for sure. in terms of my liberal arts degree, history and the liberal arts kind of has a bad rap as being kind of useless. And I really think that the mindset around this needs to change, because there's things that I learned studying history that have been absolutely critical to my success in the business world. Some of those things are, evaluating evidence, which may be questionable in nature. Dissecting narratives is an extremely useful skill in business. And also kind of hearing doublespeak, what someone says versus what they're actually saying. Studying history really gave me a sense of that. But beyond that, it also gave me this like tolerance for chaos. And when I say that, I mean like, new information is constantly changing the landscape you're working in. You might have to completely rethink a plan of action based on one piece of evidence. And the ability to keep a lot of conflicting, chaotic ideas in your head at once is actually very useful for cybersecurity.
Oh, that's a great parallel. So thinking about all that chaos, I know it, and keeping track of it and putting logic to it. I know you said you're a big chess player, and I wondered, are there any parallels in the way you approach your chess strategy to how you approach your cybersecurity work?
There's a lot of overlap here. At some point, I probably want to like write a book about how chess changed my life, because it's something that I've always loved, and something that I encourage others to practice. First, there's kind of the obvious. Chess is it's a hyper logical game. There's no element of chance. Everything that happens in a game of chess is really up to you. So it's really a game about decisions. So when you play a game of chess, what you're confronted with is how you make decisions. And this is, of course, critical to operating in life, but also critical to making decisions at work. How you make decisions is really highlighted to you, how different tactics are needed in different situations. It's one of the few things that really illustrates very clearly how, a decision that you make at one point will affect the situation, forward in time. This is a perfect example of something that you can look at and see, well, I did this here and it had this effect there. There's actually very few things in life that'll lay things out for you so clearly. So in that way, it's very valuable. But like when you play a game of chess, you're thinking kind of simultaneously about, your own strategy for protecting your king. You also have to try to predict what your opponent is trying to do, and you need to react accordingly while also going on the offensive to win a game of chess. So again, it gets back to that, like, you're holding a lot of information in your head, a lot of it is very chaotic. How do you make decisions based on that information? This kind of sums up my job very nicely. I feel, like, how do I protect my organization with the resources that I have in front of me, the position that I'm in? How do I predict what my opponents are going to do based on, what I'm seeing? But also, like, how do I make the best decisions with what's in front of me that are going to have the best possible outcomes?
Oh, yeah. Do you think, with the big show, the Queens Gambit that came out, and then all this stuff on, about the U.S. being IT systems, the government systems being infiltrated, and so now there's a bigger awareness of cybersecurity. Do you think that's helping the industry possibly recruit more people or getting more people interested in this industry?
I really hope so. I read that, chessboards were like hard to find after the Queen's Gambit came out, which made me just so very happy. You, of course, don't need an actual board to play. There's lots of places you can play online. But, I really think that the more we learn about, the dangers that are out there, and also, the sort of breadth of possibility within the field, the more people are going to be interested and join in.
Oh, yeah. So let's see. I do need to ask you this. As a woman in a male-dominated industry, did you have trouble being taken seriously when you first started out? And how about now?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I consider myself to be extremely lucky to be working at a company that really saw me as a person and saw my potential and interest and encouraged me to enter this field in the first place. Some organizations wouldn't necessarily do that. So I consider myself very lucky in that sense. But people don't generally expect to see a woman working in cybersecurity. I think that the kind of gender breakdown in the field is 1 in 10 workers are female. So we are in the minority. So, it's just something that people aren't used to seeing. So there needs to be a bit of a shift in, seeing women in these roles so that they're more used to them. And I do have to say that, there is kind of a moment, maybe if I'm meeting someone new, where they kind of suss you out and they want to see, do you know your stuff? And, this is just kind of a natural part of business. Women might feel it a little bit more than men, but it's just kind of part of the business. You have to show that you know your stuff before people respect you and take your advice, especially in something as critical as cybersecurity, right? Like, you don't just want to be taking anyone's advice on that.
Right. And do you get support from Women in Security? The Women in Cybersecurity Society?
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So I've been connected with them for, a couple years now. Not only do they provide sort of access to resources, there's lots of learning platforms, but just the camaraderie and the support that you get by meeting other women in the field has been so nice for me, especially being new to the field.
And they awarded you one of their FAST awards. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that is it stands for, I think it's Females Advancing in Science and Technology. And it is an annual award given to members of not just the organization, but, the technology field at large who have shown, particular perseverance and aptitude in the field. So I'm very honored to receive this award. It's just a big achievement for me.
Okay, and let's see. I do have a lot more questions, but Ben, do you want to ask a few related to more the technology side?
I do, and I really appreciate being able to listen on the conversation because I like to learn through observations. And a couple of key things that I picked up in this case, it's important to apply what you've learned. Your scenario of liberal arts. There's a lot of key lessons learned that you can apply those to many different scenarios, right? So even my space in engineering, I have a degree in engineering. I'm in a trade association, but the key principles that I learned there can be applied to what I do. And also the the learning agility. So being able to learn on the fly seems like it's been very beneficial for you. So I really appreciate being able to listen on the conversation. So we talked about manufacturers, and I do think there's a perception of procrastinating in the industry related to security. So what are some risks in delaying security practices?
Okay. So the risks are about as bad as you can imagine. Cybersecurity can help you not be subject to ransomware. We've all heard of ransomware. Ransomware is a billion-dollar industry, okay? People would not be doing it if it weren't very profitable. One incident can bankrupt your business. It can ruin your reputation. It is definitely a situation that can be catastrophic if not handled appropriately. But ransomware isn't the only thing. We hear a lot about ransomware because it's so dire. But really, the privacy and the safety of your employees should also really be top priority, and that's something that implementing security practices can help you with. Unfortunately, we live in a world right now where unfortunately everyone and everything is kind of on the table. So there's really no safe enclave from these issues. Your home is a target because you're connecting to your office from your home. So really the risks are quite huge at this point.
Definitely.
It's like not it's like not having health insurance or something. It can be very, very bad if something goes wrong and you don't have those in place.
Absolutely. So security is generally seen as a standalone system. What is the value of integrating tools into other applications, such as an ERP system?
Yes. I like this question, partly because it helps me to kind of shift the conversation a little bit, in that, if there's one shift I would like to see in this industry and kind of in the world at large, is that, security is not a standalone system. It's a mindset, and it's a set of habits that are embedded in your organization that really become integral to the functioning of your organization. So I think that if we can get away from that mindset of security being somehow separate and more of an embedded architecture, I think that's really going to help people kind of conceptualize the CMMC and really understand what it's asking us to do. In terms of security tools that teams will use, there's hundreds of these things on the market. You definitely want to try and pare down the number of applications that you're using within the organization, such that you're not overwhelmed with data and things to manage. So, I've heard anywhere from like 10 different applications to 70 different applications in use. So that's insane, right? Like, no team can manage that many applications feeding you data. In terms of things like ERP software, you really want to be using a system that is as full scale and will do as much as you can in one place without necessarily asking it to do things that it wasn't initially designed to do. So, in the case of ProShop ERP, I'm just talking about it because I'm obviously the most familiar with it for ERP systems, but there's a lot of features that have been built into it. There's a full-scale architecture within that software where you can, record policies and documentations, but you're still going to need separate pieces of software to do more cybersecurity type things, like network monitoring software. Everybody needs network monitoring software, and those are specifically designed to do those things. You're going to need someone who can understand the packet capturing that's going on. No one piece of software is capable of facilitating your complete security architecture. You are going to need multiple systems, which is why it's really important to choose ones that are going to go as far as they can.
Right. I think you hit on the keyword, the architecture side of it, because it is a complex system. We'll get into some great questions from the audience, and I'll weave those in as we go in the questions today. So I'll jump around a little bit. What are the most common threats? And to ask the question for the audience is, what is your number one safety tip related to those common threats?
Right. Okay. So as I said, ransomware is a huge threat. Entities are going to do their homework on you before launching an attack. They want to know what you do and how much you can pay. So it's important to just make sure that they're not finding out that information in the first place. A very, very common threat, something that every organization, every individual, every government organization is seeing right now, is phishing. Phishing, is a general term for, trying to get credentials, trying to get someone to download something into a system that would ordinarily be caught by, firewalls or antivirus. So I cannot state this strongly enough. You need to train your staff. You need to train all of your staff on how to recognize phishing and social engineering generally. It only takes one click to introduce something potentially catastrophic into your organization. And a poster on the wall or a once-a-year tutorial just really isn't enough to be educating and empowering your users of these systems to recognize these things when they come in, because it is constantly evolving, right? So this is very important. You need to train your users against phishing. This is a common threat. It's not going away. And it's one of the most common ways that things like ransomware and malware are introduced into systems. And I also just want to add that, like, there's this thing in security where we talk about human beings being, the weakest link in security. While that may be true, it's also not helpful, which is, why it would be nice to see a bit of a shift in this perspective. I think of my own team less as, walking threats, which they're not. I think of them as my small army of like empowered people who are capable of, recognizing phishing and reporting it. This is good for everybody. Like, it's good for the organization, it's good for the people, it's good for the families of the people as well, because they then pass on that information. Another common threat, if I can throw one in there, is just unpatched software.
Yeah.
We're all familiar with the SolarWinds incident at this point.
Sure.
And that was introduced via a software update, but that's kind of a standalone event, which a lot was going on in there. It doesn't negate the importance of updating your software. So that's just a simple thing that should become routine in the organization that really is effective for protecting your organization against known exploits.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You had another question. Was it the number one thing people can do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the number one thing people can do is actually like use strong passwords and use two-factor authentication wherever you can. I can talk about that a little bit later. I have a lot to say about passwords.
We'll come back to that. Yeah, there's
Okay.
a couple other questions I want to hit on before we get to some of the other questions I've lined up.
For sure.
What types of interests and aptitudes makes a good fit for a cybersecurity professional?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think definitely persistence, orientation towards detail, and again, a tolerance for chaos. There's not a distinct playbook that everyone can just copy that's going to be a one-size-fits-all for you or your organization. These systems tend to be very tailored.
Sure.
So it's important that you realize that you're not just going to come in and copy someone else's homework and have something that's good. And when I talk about persistence, it can really be a slog, to be honest. Sometimes, there's constantly things happening. There's things that you got to respond to. So it's really important to have a sense of just, persistence.
Awesome. One more question. What advice would you give for women wanting to get into this field?
Yeah, I would say that this is a great time to be learning about cybersecurity. As a woman, as a man, as a dog, it is fantastic because there are so many organizations that are trying to make this material accessible to everyone.
Right.
You don't have to pay an arm and a leg to learn this stuff. There's lots of stuff you can learn online. I would say just put on your research hat, do some Googling, and get involved in a rabbit hole. That's kind of what I started doing when I was first getting into it. And that's really what helped me orient to the sort of complexity of this field.
Awesome. Questions about threats. So small to medium-sized companies, I'm machining parts, valves, small pieces of machinery or equipment. Is the threat of foreign penetration real for small to medium-sized companies?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not trying to fearmonger. The DoD is not trying to fearmonger. But yes, this is absolutely a real threat. We kind of talked a little bit about like disparate data pieces. One piece of data over here floating around might not necessarily be a threat to you, but aggregated data is a very powerful thing.
Right.
On its own, it might not matter that some person knows that you're manufacturing a particularly small part, but that information taken with a bunch of other companies that are also manufacturing different parts, and suddenly you have the making of a knockoff F-35, which is a real example. China has an aircraft that looks very similar to the F-35. And this is because they were able to reverse engineer the aircraft through a series of targeted hacks on these smaller suppliers. So again, it gets back to kind of the idea that there's really no such thing as useless data anymore.
Sure.
It's all useful to someone somewhere for some purpose. And entities, both criminal organizations, foreign governments, are smart enough to care what large organizations are doing, but they're smart enough to care what smaller organizations are doing too, because they realize just how much of an interconnected world that is at this point. They're also aware that smaller organizations are less likely to have state-of-the-art security architectures in place, so they're going to make easier targets, right? Like that's just a fact. As I said, this is not fear-mongering. This is a reality of the world that we live in right now, and something which the CMMC standard was specifically designed to address.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What are some threats that still exist but should be gone due to best practices?
I'm so glad you asked this question. So I watched the movie Hackers like a few weeks ago for the first time, and I was surprised at like how many of the issues they talk about are still so prevalent today, like weak passwords and bad management practices. But it's interesting because the threats don't ever really go away. They just evolve, and then we evolve alongside them. So again, I have to say, passwords. I'm still very surprised that passwords are still so heavily involved in data breaches. And when I say that, I mean passwords that aren't good enough to protect what they're supposed to protect. So, if anyone is unaware, it is very easy to crack a password. You don't have to be a good hacker to do it. You just need to download a program and it'll do the work for you, right?
Sure.
So, you really want to make sure that you're choosing good, strong passwords. And, things like second factor authentication are helping with that as well. But that, it'd be really great to see that kind of dissipate in the next 10 years, because everybody knows that you need to have a good password or we stop using passwords altogether.
So Julia, I'm getting scared though, because now I have 4 kids.
Don't get scared.
I have 4 kids, and we probably have, at least 6 devices on during the day with home online school, and then my husband and I working from home. And then, sometimes my kids have their phone on with the laptop and the iPad. And so what can I tell them are weak passwords, or what are some tips for good passwords, or secure passwords?
Yes.
Let's get into the password.
I know it sounds minor, but I think maybe for people listening.
It's very important. So, generally, the most current recommendations from NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, is to create a long pass phrase. So shorter passwords are easy to crack. Longer passwords are much harder to crack. If you have a hard password to crack, criminals are just going to move on to the next easiest thing. So when they say a long pass phrase, it could be a line from a movie with a few special characters thrown in, but something that you are going to remember, because you don't want to be writing this down on a Post-it note and putting it on your screen, which still happens a lot.
That still happens.
It's true. Yeah. A long passphrase that is easy for you to remember, but that is long enough that you don't have to worry about it being, part of the 100,000 most commonly used passwords, which again can be used in these programs to crack a password.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay. Passphrase.
You feel better, Kathy?
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to, at dinner tonight, passphrases, everybody.
And special characters, like get fancy.
Oh, special.
You have kids,
definitely.
like throw in a $sign in there for some reason,
Yes. Yeah.
Just shake it up. It's going to be great.
All right.
I think we're getting to the point where cybersecurity is seen as kind of the cat and mouse game. You kind of mentioned that updating passwords and they're going to start cracking that. It's kind of continuous, never ending. How can companies develop a sense of confidence that in this never ending chase?
Yeah, I think this is also such a great question. And it kind of gets back to that idea that, security is really a mindset, and it's a marathon. You know, I really do think that, you know, knowledge is power, as, you know, cliched as it sounds. So organizations should, you know, familiarize themselves with the CMMC if they haven't already, or, you know, a similar information security standard, just to get a sense of the overall landscape. You know, I know you might read it and it might put you to sleep, and maybe that's why you have it next to your bed for like a week while you read it, but I really can't stress just how strongly it's important to have a general sense of what is expected. And you're really not going to get that in a more succinct and easily digestible way than in something like the CMMC or an information security standard. So, you know, I think confidence comes from knowledge. Knowledge comes from absorbing material. You don't have to be an expert to read that standard. If you don't understand something, put a little star next to it, continue on, come back to it. You know, there's also kind of no final ending point for this, which I think you pointed to. You know, there's no true 100% secure system anywhere, ever. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be little ways to get in. So I think it's important just to kind of realize that it is a never-ending process that is extremely important, but one that you should just kind of move on from. To be kind of blunt, you know, it's okay. Like, we're all in the same boat. We all know that there's no true state of security. You can just do the work and keep doing the work, and see the results of that.
Yeah, and I think you did hit on a key point, is that self-realization that it's not a sprint. You're not 100 yards. It's a shift of a marathon. So once you have the idea, it's going to be 26.2 miles, it's going to suck, but I know the duration, I know the length, I know how to get through that, right? And I think that's a key takeaway.
And this is an achievable goal, right? You know, companies that had no cybersecurity program are now well on their way to being compliant. We're not being asked to do something that is impossible. We're being asked to do something that is very possible.
Right.
And I was just thinking about the small companies. I know trying to get started on the CMMC, can they start with, there's 5 phases, right? And could they just start with the first phase, get that under control, then move into the second phase?
Yeah, so the levels are tied to the type of government contract that you have or want to get. So if you do any sort of contract work with the DoD, you need to be at least level 1. Level 2 is kind of a feeder into level 3, and the same with level 4 is kind of a feeder into level 5. Level 5 is the state-of-the-art nuclear facility type stuff. Most organizations are really only concerned with levels 1 to 3. And if you look at the level 1 requirements, there's about 20 of them. It's really very basic things that, you know, I don't even think you'd need to hire a consultant to enact. They're very straightforward. It's very clearly laid out what's expected. So yeah, you know, if you want to do a level 3, you definitely need level 1 and level 2 in addition. So you should start there. But if, you know, you just need level 1, you can stop there if that's all you want to do.
Yep. And a side question related to that, I feel like, you know, obviously the CMMC is geared towards the defense, but I feel like if, even as a company that's not part of the defense infrastructure, it seems very valuable to start probing into this a little bit more, just to understand the ecosystem too.
Oh, yes. I would recommend that every business, no matter what you make or do, whether you're a manufacturing company or not, that you really take a look at what's going on in your cybersecurity. You know, every organization has room for improvement, and these issues are not going away anytime soon. So it's really important to really start addressing them and to take this seriously.
Let's talk about the impact of the CMMC. So how important is it for contract manufacturers on DoD contracts to be either implementing or being part of the certification process now?
Yeah, you know, as I said, if you want or have a government contract with the DoD, you're going to need to have some sort of certification. And again, that's going to be dictated by the work that you do. So you know, unfortunately, it's required if black and white, you know, it seems like. But that's not to say, as you said, that businesses that maybe don't have contracts, they can still get a lot out of the CMMC,
Yeah.
and it will bring a lot of benefit to their organization, even if they're not necessarily going for government contracts.
Gotcha.
And I know that since this has come out, the CMMC, there's been a really hard push towards it. There's been a really strong timeline on it. And then, the pandemic happened and everyone was like, what is happening? And they were like, full steam ahead. So, it's still very much full steam ahead for the CMMC,
Right.
but smaller organizations should not be panicking at this point, because it is going to take a few months to get all the auditors set up, which a few of them now are. So you have a bit of time. If you haven't started looking at this, you definitely should. But if you're not compliant right this second, there's really no need to panic, because the smaller organizations are going to be asked last in the process
Sure.
for their compliance.
Yeah, and the key takeaway for me is some of the security you want to stay as current as possible, right? So if you start to lag this time next year, it could be a really significant problem. But
yes,
if you're staying current now, I think you'll be able to stay ahead of it.
Yeah.
Awesome. I want to take one of the questions from the audience here. What part about cybersecurity are you most passionate about?
Oh, that's a good question. There's so much that interests me in this field. I'm like always really in awe of just how complicated everything is.
Right.
But I really like, I like working with people, and I like educating people and sharing the knowledge that I've learned with people, because that's really where I see the most benefit and the most potential for change. So that's something that I really feel quite passionate about.
Awesome.
I have a question that relates to that a little bit. With the Women in Cybersecurity Society, does your involvement with that organization do programs to help girls that are interested in cybersecurity or STEM kinds of courses?
Yeah. Again, with the pandemic, some previous plans kind of got a little bit sidetracked, but that is certainly part of their MO, is working with, girls and women at various stages of their career, and to kind of foster that ability or interest.
It sounds like there might be times when you get discouraged, except I'm thinking that you probably don't get discouraged, because you seem really gung-ho. Is there anything you do when you feel discouraged, or that you could share with others to think about so that they're not discouraged?
Yeah. Another great question. I do get discouraged. I am only human. But I always come back to the fact that I love the work, and there's so many people and organizations that need help. I try not to get, too bogged down in discouragement, because I know that I'm capable of assisting people that need it right now. So again, that's something that's very deeply personal to me, is offering that kind of support and help. So that's what kind of pushes me forward, is the fact that there is such a great need for skilled people in this field. And I think in my own small way, I can make a difference.
I think so many young women and girls and boys, it seems like, everyone wants to make the world a better place, and they want to help others. And to think of cybersecurity as truly helping others is really a great way to think about something technically, that it is helping you protect your money, protect your assets, keep your family safe.
Yeah.
I really like that way of looking at it. That's really great, Julia. Wow.
Julia, I have a similar question. So, it seems like, are there peer groups or associations or groups that you find useful working with on the professional side, on the security side, but also as a woman leader? Are there combinations of groups and associations that you feel can help you grow professionally or help you grow as a person that you found useful?
Yeah, for sure. As I said already, the Women's Cybersecurity Society has been really instrumental in my success. I still use them for support and resources. But I've also done a bit of work reaching out to organizations on LinkedIn that are just,
Okay.
CMMC information boards where professionals can share what's going on and updates. I also subscribe to the CISA, the Center for Internet Security. That's the wrong acronym, but it's the CISA for their kind of daily updates. This is a state of the art national organization that sends out security alerts for things to look out for. So you definitely want to be subscribing to stuff like that. I also have a few newsletters that I subscribe to from security professionals that I find particularly, intelligent and knowledgeable. I can share those later if you want. But definitely subscribing to security researchers, reaching out to organizations on LinkedIn or locally, and staying kind of educated on these things is very important.
Awesome.
I do have some more questions. Yeah. Okay. Well, all right, here's one for you that I was thinking of asking earlier, but I just wondered, do you ever employ the Queen's Gambit when you play chess?
Okay, so the Queen's Gambit is like a very famous kind of set of moves and gameplay. The reason why it's one of the most famous is because it's based really on just like one opening move. So you're 100% going to encounter the Queen's Gambit if you play chess at all. So the answer is yes, I often play the Queen's Gambit, and it's often in your interest to take the piece that is part of the gambit. That's why it's called a gambit. It's like, do you take this piece that's offered to you or not? It's often in your favor to do that. So yes, the answer is
okay.
That's handy. I've been brushing up on my chess skills this past year, and I will heed that advice.
Nice.
Oh yeah. Oh, Ben, really? I've been practicing with my 16-year-old. So
good.
Maybe we'll have to have a chess off when we all get together.
Ooh,
we could try.
So Julia, this sounds like an incredible career. It sounds, there's so much responsibility to it all. How do you keep everything balanced in your life, and what do you do to unwind?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I ever do unwind. Kidding. So I play violin, which is like about as far from a digital environment as you can get. And so I really do use that to unwind. There's something about playing music that like really relaxes and resets my brain. So I do try to play every day. Playing any sort of music I think is really beneficial for that sort of thing. But honestly, like I really try to prioritize my sleep. That's actually become a little bit easier in the pandemic because a lot of us aren't commuting. But sleep is really the foundation of your success and ability to work well. So, if anyone is chronically underslept, if there's any way you can increase that, I think it'll be beneficial. I know that's hard for working mothers. So that's something that, we just kind of have to think about as a society.
Yeah, excellent advice. Getting plenty of sleep and playing music.
Yes.
Even singing songs.
Sure.
Where do you think cybersecurity is headed?
Oh man, I definitely think that cybersecurity has become very important over the past couple of years. It's going to become even more important because none of us are going to leave the online world at this point. So I really think I see it becoming even more embedded in our lives, and I really hope that the world does become safer as more people learn about these things. As I said, like threats are constantly evolving and we just kind of have to evolve alongside them. But I think as cybersecurity grows as a discipline and as more people are aware of these issues, the better state it's going to be in.
Yeah, it's just going to keep on growing and offering more opportunities, it sounds like.
I see a lot of like automation going on, and a lot of like machine learning and AI being used as well to kind of detect threats in an environment, and that's really interesting, and that's going to keep happening as well. With a bit of a caveat is that we don't want to fully automate these systems. I don't think you always want at some point a human being to say, yes, this machine made the right decision. But there's going to be a lot of that going on as well.
So is there a ethics advisory board for cybersecurity or something like that?
That's a great question. I'm sure that there is, but I don't know of it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like the future with more robots and as our life becomes more automated with things happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, it's a little off the wall question, but so Julia 2021, if you could go back to young Julia, maybe teenage Julia, what kind of advice would you give her, or a heads up, or anything besides the coronavirus upcoming advice that you give, teenage Julia about the future?
Yeah, I would probably, as I said, I studied Latin, and that actually really helped me when I was kind of starting to learn a little bit of coding. I would encourage my teenage self to start coding earlier because I really just didn't realize that I had an aptitude for it until, again, later in life. And I would suggest everyone at some point see if they have an aptitude or an interest in this field, or in the field of tech and manufacturing in general. Go out there, expose yourself to this stuff. Try not to be discouraged if someone tells you you can't do something. Usually that means that you've hit on something important and should keep pursuing it. But that's probably what I wish I'd started coding earlier in my life.
Awesome. That's good.
Oh,
That's
yeah. Excellent advice. I love it.
Kathy, I think we're winding down with questions. Julie, are there any closing thoughts that you want to convey to the audience as we wind down?
I really just want to make it clear that there is so much opportunity in this field for anyone that's wanting to enter it, and you do not necessarily need a strong technical ability to work in this field. That's a bit of a misinterpretation of the field. My role right now isn't 100% technical. And there's lots of roles that are available in cybersecurity that are not hyper technical. So if that's what's keeping you from looking into this, maybe you want to work more with people, or maybe you're more into policy or whatever, just keep in mind that there are positions available that are not necessarily technical. If you're technical, there's going to be a lot more, but don't ever let that stop you from pursuing or looking into this field further.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. Well, Julia, thank you so much for taking time to tell us about your career journey in cybersecurity, and wish you the best in your career and life. And hopefully we can see you in IMTS 2022. It's going to be a long ways.
That would be so good. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so great to talk to you guys.
Oh, Julia, thank you so much. Really great advice. I love the pass phrases, and that there's so much opportunity, even if you're not technical. And, people, young women, girls, everyone should explore, if they're interested, explore cybersecurity, because it sounds like it's full of opportunities.
Yeah, I will also just throw out there that there is a less than 1% vacancy rate in this field. So if you have skills, you're going to be, there's a deep need for professionals in this field. So it's a great field to get into.
Thank you so much. Gosh, I hate to bring it to a close. I had so much fun. Well, everyone, remember to check out the next session in the IMTS Spark Women Make Manufacturing Move Show next Thursday, February 25th, 10 a.m. Conversation with GE Appliances Vice President Marcia Bray and Women in Manufacturing President Allison Grayles on authentic leadership. I hope you can join us. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.